Okay, so we've got two more IGAs to go over, mostly because everything's a give and take. And so Forsyth, in the process of talking to us about the tower, had some things that were very important to them. So that's the other two IGAs we have before us.
Okay, and what I'd like to address now is the McGinnis Ferry widening IGA. And this is a project that Forsyth County has initiated, which the city of Johns Creek has an interest in, and this is the widening, or the continuation of the widening of McGinnis Ferry Road from Sargent Road at or about to Georgia 400 at or about. And this is a portion of road where the northern part of the roadway is in Forsyth County. The southern part of the roadway is split between Johns Creek and the city of Alpharetta. So what this agreement entails is that the city of Johns Creek would cooperate with Forsyth County to do the engineering and concept for that widening of that particular roadway. And our share of that would be related to the linear foot calculation from where it sits in our city limits versus the project limits. So it's 24.7%, I believe, is the percentage that's within the city of Johns Creek. So the total engineering is estimated at this point to be approximately $2 million, and we would be responsible for 24.7% of that total based on the actual costs of the engineering. There's several other provisions within the IGA that deal with sort of how do we go about that process, giving the city controls over the alignment of the roadway and treating us as somewhat of an equal partner as we move through the engineering process. The financial arrangements meet our cash flow needs, and that what we will be agreeing to is providing $200,000 generally upon the execution of the agreement. We have those funds mostly budgeted in the fiscal year 2015 budget, and because we've had initially decided to go ahead and do some engineering on the bridge that's on McGinnis Ferry Road somewhere near the Seven Oaks. So if you remember, that's actually in the budget for this year. And then what we've agreed to is then in each subsequent year we would pay $100,000 until we've reached the total cost of the project going forward. And that sum, which is estimated to be around $2 million, we don't know the final amount until all the engineering is completed. I'd be happy to answer any questions that y'all may have.
Questions on that one?
So, I didn't see the actual IGA.
If you go to the council agenda, you can find the IGA. For whatever reason, it didn't make the work session. Again, still perfecting the system. So if you go to item number 4 under your...
I apologize. In the IGA for the widening is under, but it's under D. It wasn't placed under the work.
It's actually, the IGA is not under D. The memo is, but not the...
No, I've got a...
That's the widening.
I know for certain if you go to the council meeting and you pick the Johns Creek IGA for the widening, the IGA will show up there.
Some have it, some don't. But if you go, definitely if you go to new business item number 4, item number... Yeah, item number 4, you have the actual IGA.
It's for both. I guess this is just the widening, and then separate is the maintenance.
Correct.
Okay.
So questions on the widening?
I have 2 questions. Can we kind of cap those costs? I mean, this thing could go $3 million for the engineering study.
So we're involved in the process of the awarding. We're signatory, so we have built-in controls from that standpoint. The reality is there will be change orders. There usually is of a project of this magnitude. Tom, is that a fair statement?
It is fair.
And so it may be a little bit more than we're thinking right now, but that will be because he and his counterpart will be having conversations about why certain things need to be studied more, or re-engineered, or they find underground utilities or gas lines that they didn't anticipate and need to shift the road and therefore re-engineer it. So that there may be legitimate reasons. I don't think you're going to see massive changes in the dollar amount that aren't being called by our folks, putting their heads together with their folks. Is that Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
So this is truly a joint project. The difference is the third party is Alpharetta, and right now they're not at the table. But that means that Forsyth has to pick up that side of it. They bear that risk.
The next question would be, how much benefit will we see from this, do you see?
I'm hopeful quite a bit, primarily because of the road we showed earlier coming down to McGinnis Ferry. If they have another access to get to 400, that they don't have to come down and go across Kimball Bridge, just trying to get more options. The biggest improvement we're going to see there is because they're going to widen 400, put another lane both north and south from, not from McGinnis, but McFarland, at least up to the other side of 20. It may go all the way up to 369, which is going to have a tremendous effect.
And potentially a new interchange, which is being studied right now. I think they've got over $1 million invested, they Forsyth, in studying a new interchange where McGinnis today is just a overpass over 400, which could give folks on the north side of our city, that'll all depend on them, or people coming from directions away from the city, maybe potentially a faster path home back to the city.
The IGR has been approved by the Federal Highway for the interchange.
And then lastly, although we shouldn't plan for something that doesn't exist yet, McGinnis Ferry Road would be a significant artery into and out of the district. And so I think that at some point, if we move forward with the district, we're clearly going to need to give folks easy way in and out.
Question for Richard. In Article 1, I'm reading this correctly, it links our initial payment of $200,000 to signing of the tower IGA rather than to any actual incurrence of cost for this engineering work.
Actually, it's upon 5 days of the permit to commence construction of the tower.
Business purpose was, Bob, that we want to make sure that the permit is issued timely. They want to make sure that the money for the engineering is given as quickly as possible. So we both have vested interest in tying those together. So we're simply saying, you issue the permit, we'll hand you a check for $200,000. They get what they want, we get what we want.
Mr. Mayor, if I could also point out later in that section in item number 3, in the last sentence, it says, in the event the design and engineering is abandoned or the city's contribution exceeds its pro rata share of the design and engineering costs, the county shall refund the balance of the city's contribution within 30 days of the abandonment or completion of the design and engineering. So we are putting our money ahead of the design work being completed, and it's kind of a partnership where we're committing our funds. But if they decide to say, you know what, we're not going to go forward with the project, or we want to put our money into something else, we get our money returned to us in a
How do
timely
we
manner.
define abandonment?
That's an action. It's an overt action by a government.
So it is an explicit and overt action that's declared, it's not subjective.
You abandon a project. It is highly unlikely in this instance because they did a bond referendum to fund this, and you rarely abandon a project in a bond referendum unless the world is near ending.
I think the other thing that's sort of driven us a little bit on this agreement is that we're going to have a lot of issues going forward in partnership with Forsyth County potentially, and that we want to take this as a true partnership. And so while I agree with you that you could potentially get in a disagreement over when did they actually abandon it, I think good faith partnership means we're going to trust that when they give up on the project, they'll give us our money back, because we're certainly not going to do business with them again if they treated us unfairly.
But there's no time frame within which they have to commence engineering or declare that they've abandoned the project.
There's a practical time limit. They've collected bond money or are collecting bond money. You don't hold that money, and at a certain point, I believe there's a legal principle called arbitrage, where you've held the money too long and you've been collecting bond money and not spending it, and you have a responsibility to spend the money you've collected.
And they specifically identified this project to be the subject of the expenditure of the bond money.
So how long do they have before they can no longer hold on to it? Week, a month, 10 years?
Bob, I appreciate the question. I think that if you've been following, and I certainly have, the discussions that are going on in Forsyth, this is near the top of their list. I think there is little likelihood that the engineering won't begin the day after the ink is dry on the contracts.
They-
Tom?
They're hopeful to have it under contract with the designer by the 1st of July. They have to go out first and get proposals. Then they hope to have the award by July 1.
And they may even have an expedited path on that. They have a standard contract with Moreland Altabelli, and they just have to decide whether they're going to use them or put it out to bid. We have similar contracts on a smaller scale because we're a city, not a county, and don't have those kinds of magnitude of projects.
We certainly wouldn't pay the subsequent payments if they had commenced.
There's room for dispute should something go wrong. I don't really believe.
Don't expect it, but.
And I don't want to start off on a negative foot, so I want to be clear, because like we watched their work session, they're likely to watch our work session, and I want to make it clear to the chairman and to the commission that it was very enjoyable to work with them and to try to get through this process. For years, we have struggled. Matter of fact, the third agreement we're going to talk about is one that is 3 years in the making. We have struggled to have a strong partnership, and I truly believe that circumstances are such now that this tower created dialogue that otherwise might not have happened. It's leading to 3 very positive outcomes, and I'm hopeful that those 3 positive outcomes will lead into many, many more positive outcomes. We still have needs for things like stronger coordination of public safety resources, because things don't care about city borders or arbitrary county borders. Things happen. They need us, we need them. Traffic doesn't care about borders. So there's all sorts of issues that will come up in the future that if you're moving ahead in a positive way on one thing, it can parlay into many, many other things. And I think that all 3 of these are worthy on their own, but they're even more worthy when you think about the long-term relationship with Forsyth
So I
County.
am, for the camera and for our friends, extremely supportive of these 3 IGAs, but as our good friend here will say, his purpose in life is to protect us from worst-case scenarios, and so that's why I'm interested
Absolutely.
in probing
And I would
on the
not, and I
language.
would not in any way want to be viewed as discouraging you from doing all the due diligence you feel you need to do. I will tell you that I have a personal high degree of confidence that this project's moving forward and will go well beyond engineering to completion.
I'm good.
Other questions on the widening? Comfortable moving that one? Well, let's get to the third one.